Speaks. I'm sorry to interrupt everyone saying hi to each other, but we want to get started, and we're all very excited to hear our speaker tonight. I just want to thank you all for coming to History Speaks. This is a program that the Historical Foundation puts on. This is our third History Speaks this year. We have one more next Tuesday, and I hope you can join us. It's an evening with Jensen and Roger Cummins, who is a wonderful speaker, actually will be in character presenting on Jensen, who is the founder of the Clearing. So I don't want to take too much of Linda's time, and Linda is someone who really doesn't need much of an introduction. So I am very, very happy to welcome Linda Mayhew Carey, who will be telling us about the Knudson house tonight.
When I didn't need glasses, but I might lose my place. I wonder if there's anybody here who has never heard of the Knudson house. Oh, good. It's not a hotel any longer, as you probably know, but when it was, is there anyone here who stayed in it? You don't count. Neither of you. That's my family. How many of you have eaten a meal there? Lots of hands. I remember most of you from Smorgasbord. I stood in the middle of the table, making sure things were filled up. Perhaps you didn't know that it was not originally built to be a hotel. It was grandfather, Peter Knudson, as a home for his new bride. Grandpa Pete was born in 18 to Ephriam in, well, about 144 years ago. I can't count that high. Grandpa Pete was 6 years old at the time. His uncle had already come to America many years earlier. None of us know why that happened. Why did one brother go to America and end up in Ephriam? And why did the other brother not come? He was invited many times. His brother wrote to him over and over again and said, sell everything and come here. There are many opportunities. But he didn't come. Well, finally he made up his mind to do it, and they did come. And it was quite an adventurous thing for a family to do in those days. They had to sail on 3 different ships in order to get here. And they had 5, count them, 5 children. They were aged 2, 4, 6, 9, and 13. Now who wants to travel with a group like that? They made it, and the uncle put them up for a brief time until he found a house for them on Town Line Road. I'm sure everybody knows where that is. It was suddenly for sale. The family had troubles in parts of their family, and they had to leave very quickly. And he purchased it for his brother, my great-grandfather, and pretty soon they moved in. I remember Grandpa telling me that the day that they first saw the house, they had walked up German Road to the Town Line Road, turned left, and walked to the house. The children, of course, walked much faster. They knew where they were going, and they ran pell-mell into the house. They found a bowl of apples sitting on the table, which absolutely thrilled them. They ran in, instantly grabbed them, and began to eat, and then came running down the hill to tell their parents about the good fortune that they had, that there were already food items in the house. I don't think there were anymore. They ate them all. Perhaps because of his uncle already living in Ephriam, they settled quickly, and they joined the Ephriam Moravian Church. They also all went to the Ephriam Grade School, which we now know as the Pioneer Schoolhouse. I hate to tell you that because it makes it sound really old, but I went there. My mother, my grandfather, I think I might have been in 2nd or 3rd grade when they built the new schoolhouse up on the hill, and we were quite thrilled with it because it had indoor plumbing. Grandpa's oldest brother and sister were all helping in the field with their father, So when his mother became very ill after childbirth, Grandpa Pete was the one who was nominated by his mother to help her in the house. She did feel badly to have to take him out of school, but she was so sickly that she was needing him to help her with the cooking because there was a new baby. She had to teach him how to cook, and he was 9.5. Evidently, that long of a time is what made him be such a good cook, such a well-known good cook. However, he didn't really mind because he had no interest in his father's farm. His older brother started out working on it, but pretty soon he got sick of it and he went off, I'd like to say off to sea, but he was to the Great Lakes, so can you say off to lake? He went off to lake to sail. He did not make a lot of money, which is what he expected to do, because unfortunately he drowned. In his middle teens, Peter also decided that he would be a sailor, so he was gone for a good long while on the Great Lakes. I didn't bring all the pictures that I have of the boats that he sailed on, but they were good size, and he became a really excellent sailor. Soon his two younger brothers followed him to the Great Lakes. The next youngest brother, his name was Ed, who really didn't care for sailing. I don't think he lasted more than a year or two. And then he came back and took over his father's house and bought extra land, and he became a farmer. That's all he wanted to do. He was a good farmer. The youngest brother, named Jack, decided none of that was for him, and he somehow found the money to go to chiropractic school. And he did practice both in Sturgeon Bay and here in Ephriam. He had an office in his house here in Ephriam, which I think Kevin Free now lives in. And he had one in Sturgeon Bay. My mother did go to him one time, and she said she thought she was worse when she got out of here. Town Line Road was the place where most of the Germans had settled. Peter's next door neighbor was Hulda Seiler. He knew he couldn't afford to marry anybody for a while, but they did keep company whenever he was in port from his sailing ventures. When he asked her to marry him in 1902, he purchased some land as soon as she said yes. It was on the main street of Ephriam, up the hill from the Anderson store. The land was on the water side of the street, which upset Peter's father very much. He said the land was worthless. You couldn't farm on it for a hill of beans. Peter said, I know. He had no plans to ever be a farmer. And his next younger brother, Ed, who was loving the farming, did stay in the old family home, and that made the father happy. Peter and Hulda were married in December of 1903, and they moved into the new house that he had built. This is Peter and his wife, Hulda Seiler, on their wedding day. I was kind of surprised when I saw this picture long ago, because the wife is sitting instead of the husband. Nowadays, mostly when you have a couple's picture, the man is sitting and the wife is standing. I don't understand that. This is better. They learned that good bread was hard to come by in the village. They began to bake up to 50 loaves a day. That's a lot of bread. But they sold them to the summer cottage people, as well as to the people who were living aboard their sailing yachts. In 1904, Dr. Millspaw, who had a cottage right up the street from Grandpa's house, said, I wish you'd build a dining room. We who have cottages and come here for the summer never can go out to dinner. My wife is tired of cooking. It's hot in the kitchen. And the few hotels here in Ephriam only serve meals to their own guests. We can't go there. My, things have changed, haven't they? Dr. Millspaw added, I will finance it if you will do it. Grandpa said, "No, thank you, but I will talk with my wife. If we decide to do it, I will finance it myself." Huldah evidently agreed because Peter went to Michigan for the whole of the following winter lumbering. He was very strong and didn't seem to find the work very hard. When he returned in the spring, he had collected enough money to build the summer dining room addition, and a summer kitchen as well. I'm going to flash another picture before I move this one because I want you to see, pay attention to the dress that Huldah's wearing. This is my sister, many years later, wearing Huldah's wedding dress. Isn't that lovely? This is the little house that started out the Knudson house. This was the house that Peter built for Huldah. Looked like they maybe only had 2 rooms, maybe 3 on the first floor, and possibly 2 rooms on the second floor. Well, when you were going to be in the hotel business, you had to have a little more room. And after Dr. Millspaw had suggested that he build the addition, he had enough foresight to add rooms above the first floor. He built the summer dining room and the summer kitchen, but there was a second floor, and there were rooms that could be rented, just in case. In 1907, my mother was born. This is Pete and Huldah holding my mother, Melinda. She had a lot of nicknames in her lifetime, but at this time she was only called Melinda. I'm named after her, and Mother was Mally and I was Linda, and neither one of us were called Melinda anymore. After a short while, my mother was only 13, Huldah passed away. She had a heart attack, and you know, the doctor might not even live in the same town, and they couldn't save her. My mom remembered that Grandpa Pete came to get her and walked her up the hill back to home and said, "Your mother is very, very ill." He didn't tell her that she had passed away, but then by the time he got to the cottage, he had to tell her. And Mother remembers that as the worst day of her life, as you can imagine. It wasn't long before Peter found that he had to be able to do something. He didn't want the hotel anymore. He sold it to his brother Jack, the chiropractor, and he ran it for about a year. And Peter went down to the Evergreen Beach Hotel, which now has a new name, Water Street Inn, I think. Cordell Hoganson, who had owned the Evergreen Beach, had fallen very ill, and he was a big man, and his wife Tonetta could not handle him, take care of him. And so they asked my grandfather if he would come and take care of Cordell. And Peter said, "Oh, I don't think I can do that, because you see, I have a little girl." "Oh," Tonetta said, "we would be so happy to have a child in the house again. Please come." So they did. And also in the house was my second grandmother, Dina. Dina Hoganson was the only unmarried child, and Grandpa Pete and Grandma Dina hit it off, and pretty soon they got married. So I have relatives on every side of Ephriam. There were many cottages eventually, but to begin with, there were only 2. Grandpa wasn't going to build any at all. He didn't really want to be in the hotel business, he said. But people kept asking to stay in the rooms above the house, and they would run out of rooms, and people would be upset and disappointed and even maybe annoyed. So then he built a few cottages. This is not the first one, but I'm showing it just because I wanted you to see the dinner bell. You see it on the post there? All the hotels in Ephriam rang a dinner bell when it was time to come and eat, and they all served 3 meals a day. Believe me, you don't want to go into the business. It is so much work. But the dinner bells would ring, the breakfast bell, the lunch bell, all over town, And if you were walking through the town, you would hear one and another, and we all got so that we knew whose bell was whose. Oh, that's Eagle Inn. That's Edgewater Lodge. We recognized the tones of the bells. Remember, Bart? Grandpa said, I'm sorry to tell you this is wrong, but he said that he bought that bell in Fish Creek when the steamer Hackley went down, that it was a ship's bell. I believe he was right in that it was a ship's bell. But the steamer Hackley wasn't dragged out of the bottom of the lake for many, many years after, many decades after that, so it couldn't be from the Hackley. But it's definitely a ship's bell. And we had a long cord that rang it. I bet you rang it, Don Nelson. I bet you rang it. Everybody rang the bell. Well, they had to ask for it. And my mother, of course, this was long before telephones, and long before cell phones and all kinds of devices that we can get a hold of each other immediately when we want to. But my mother had devised a way that she could get a hold of me or anyone else who was far away on the property, for instance, on the beach. I was always on the beach in the summer, and if she needed me to come home, she would ring the bell once. Not ding dong, just ding. And you better get up the hill fast. Then we have Cottage 4, and the person who now owns it is here. That's Dick Christensen's cottage. It was originally built as a one-cottage edifice, and it slept 8 to 10 people. And my dad noticed that there weren't 8 to 10 people families very often. So he divided this cottage in half. Was it still in half when you bought it?
No.
It was totally divided in half, and a bathroom was put in on each side. I bet Dick remembers.
It had 2 back doors.
Yeah, 2 back doors. And it used to have 2 front doors.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Anyhow, they put this partition in between so that they could rent it twice, and then only 4 people could stay at each cottage, and it was rented all the time. So we, instead of Cottage 4, it became 4 North and 4 South, because you had to differentiate. And some people would say, I want to rent 4 North next summer. And Dad might say, I'm sorry, it's already occupied for the whole month of July. And they would be so annoyed, because, goodness sakes, 4 South couldn't possibly be as nice as 4 North. I don't know what all that is about. This is the side, the south side of 4 South. And you see what a large fireplace it had. Of course, they had to have a fireplace because, as you may remember, it isn't always hot in Ephriam in the summer. These were never rented in the winter, they weren't insulated. But if you wanted to stay in the summer on a 52-degree day, you need a little fire in the fireplace. So all of the cottages had that type of heating. This is Cottage 5, another log cabin. I do not know, my grandfather never told me, my mother didn't know which of these 2 log cabins Grandpa built and which one they brought across the ice and dragged it up the hill. Does that sound like fun to you? There was trees everywhere. I don't know how they got the cottage up the hill. But one of these arrived in that way. This is the side of that cottage that faces the water. It no longer looks quite like that, as you can well imagine. Bathrooms have been put in, kitchens have been put in, and they are all self-sufficient, so you don't have to have a major lodge. When Grandpa built all the cottages, there were outhouses. Oh, goodness, do you all remember that? Oh. And then when my dad put in plumbing, so everybody had a bathroom, they did not, it never occurred to Daddy to put in a kitchen as well, because they were all expected, and they expected that they would come into the Knudson House dining room for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, which was very common in all of Ephriam. Cottages for people to rent and stay in are not the only kind of cottage that my dad and grandpa ever built. This is a playhouse that they built for me when I was about 7 or 8. And it was 9 by 12. I was shocked. I expected a little playhouse that was about this tall. And my dad said, I'm not building anything that I can't stand up in. So I got a great big playhouse. We divided it with curtains into rooms, so we had a bedroom, a kitchen, and a living room. My mother upholstered old benches and one thing and another, so I had furniture. And I cannot tell you how many hours my sister and I spent in that playhouse. And so did all the little neighbor children. We had a neighbor family, summer people, that came every single year, and their daughter was Terry's best friend, and they played there all the time. Joni Lewis and I played there all the time. Even we let her brother play with us sometimes. You can't see it in this picture, but on the front door, there is rose mulling. When my mother found out about rose mulling, she kind of got a sickness over it. So pretty soon we had rose mulling everywhere. And one of her nursing school friends had been in a family that knew of rose mullers, people who do the painting. These two ladies were from Elkhorn, Wisconsin, and unbeknownst to us, they were famous all over the country for how wonderful their rose mulling was. So my dad figured out how he could afford them. He offered them a cottage for the week, rent-free, and all their meals if they would spend each morning painting. So all the cottages and the Knudson house proper all had rose mulling all over the place. I bet there isn't any of it left. It doesn't suit everybody. Perhaps you know that there is a similar kind of painting in Germany called Bauernmalerei, which means farm painting. I took a class and I was able to learn how to do that, sort of. But I wouldn't even dream of trying rose mulling because it is so much more intricate.
Mom, you want to say who that is? Was that Grandpa Mayhew?
Yes, the man in the back that's a little taller is my dad, Tom Mayhew. The lady on the far right is my mother, Mally. The little child in her lap is my sister, who is here tonight, and then me. And the lady on the left with that little girl is my Aunt Catherine from Australia. Auntie Kath was a masseuse. And one night, my mother said, oh, I'm so busy in the kitchen, can you put Linda to bed? And she did. And she said, would you like a back rub? And of course I said yes. And I thought, this is pretty close to heaven. So I never wanted my mother to put me to bed again. I have several pictures in a row of what the Knudson house looked like at various times. I just wanted you to see that there was a rather steep incline going up to the street, but in this picture there are steps, and they're in this picture as well. But here, oh, this is actually, I'm sorry, this is even later. This shows that little red trim around the edge of the doors and windows. That was Mom's idea. After they went to Norway the first time, she found out that they did all sorts of decoration. So my dad probably went, oh, we should have never gone, because then we had a lot more things to do. You see the little Nissa? Some people call it a troll. If you call it a troll, we know you're from Germany. The Nissas in Norway always have little pointy hats. They're almost always red. And they are very sweet to you as long as you treat them well. If you give them hay and oats and a dish of water on New Year's Eve, all will be well for you that year. If you forget, they will play all kinds of tricks on you. Mother always said we only had goodness. This is a much older picture after Grandpa's original house was built, and when he was asked to build it on. The part here that's on the right is the dining room. You can't see the summer kitchen. That would be off towards the water from this picture. But the picture is sort of plain, and maybe that's because the yard is sort of plain. And when I was little, in about that area where that bush is in the front yard, there was a syringa bush. Do you know what syringa is? It's a mock orange. It was gigantic, and when it bloomed, the fragrance would overwhelm you. Unbelievably beautiful. There was also a lilac about the same size. So we had lots of bushes. This picture shows what the left side or south side of the Knudson house looked like before my parents put on a winter kitchen. You come down the steps, which at this moment actually aren't steps, it was a flagstone walk, and oh my goodness, in the rain was that hard to walk on without falling down. I have quite a few knots in my head from doing that. You come into the front door and turn left, and pretty soon there'd be a wall. Well, my mother and father couldn't go somewhere else for the winter, so they needed to have a winter kitchen. They didn't want to heat the whole summer kitchen and dining room, so they added on this little addition. Later on, it wasn't quite as little. Carrie and I remember it when it was little, but they doubled the size of it at some point. And I know what it looks like now because our daughter and son-in-law, who are here tonight, now own this part of the Knudson house. Believe me, it was quite a thrill to have a piece of the Knudson house come back in the family after such a long time. What made it do that? Thank you. I suppose you noticed the rocking chairs on the front porch? Every hotel in Ephriam had rocking chairs on the front porch. They were always full of people, rocking. That's all there seemed to be to do in the very old days. When I was a kid, my dad said, "Would you like to take sailing lessons?" And that's how I got introduced to the yacht club. And I thought, what would people do if they didn't have something else but rocking to do? So that was the last time I ever sat in a rocking chair in my front porch. Mother thought, after having gone to Norway to visit, that the best thing she could do would be to have a more Scandinavian meal. So she invented the totally Scandinavian smorgasbord. Now you hear that word used a lot. After Mother's smorgasbord, other places in the area started having smorgasbords. It made my mother so irritated because what they were was large buffets with wonderful food. There wasn't a single place in Ephriam or anywhere in Door County that didn't have wonderful food. But Mother said it's not a smorgasbord unless it has Scandinavian food. And she made sure she had something from all 4 Scandinavian countries. She was famous for her Swedish meatballs, which took 2 days to cook. We had the darn smorgasbord every Thursday night. So when you were done with it, you had to start all over and get ready for next week. We had to change the configuration of the tables in the dining room. One had to go out into the living room in order to make room for the food table. There was so much effort involved that all the girls said, "Oh, it's Thursday. I hate Thursday." We had many, many wonderful waitresses over the years, and these are girls that I remember clearly. I probably was only 9 when they were there. And I didn't see them after they left for many years. And the girl on the left came up here to Ephriam about 5 years ago and just called me up out of the blue. Just so wonderful. She still remembered the horrible costumes they had to wear for Smorgasbord. Not only did they have the costume itself, and you can't see this in this picture, but Mother dyed nylon stockings red. I don't know if my sister would agree that that is the least bit Norwegian, but Mother thought it was. Well, of course, Mother thought anything that was red was better. So the girls had to wear these red nylons on a hot summer's night. That was not very popular with them. But because this is a black and white picture, you can't tell that 2 of the costumes are black and red and 2 of them are yellow and blue. So that would be the Swedish or the Norwegian coloring. We didn't have anybody with Danish costumes. I don't know why. Mother, why did you not do that? Everybody thought this was just Scandinavian. A lot of the people who came really didn't know what the word means. Scandinavian meant Norwegian to you, and it meant Swedish to her, and what's the difference? Anyhow, she tried to be authentic. So besides the Swedish baked beans and the Swedish meatballs, we had Norwegian creamed potatoes. We had goat cheese, which was called geitost. Is that right, Carrie? It looked like caramel candy. It was on the cheese tray, so that should be your clue that it was cheese. But a lot of people thought, oh, how interesting to have a piece of candy on the cheese tray, and they would put it in their mouth and go, ooh. It had a very unique taste. I grew up on it, so I love it, but maybe you wouldn't. I should tell you that the girl on the second left was from, gosh, it just went out of my head. Ruta and Ilga were from somewhere in Europe. I can't remember where. And she got a big kick out of dressing up. This was Ilga, and she was quite shy. She got over it. You can't be very shy if you're a good waitress, and she became a good waitress. Her sister was not shy, and she was a terrific artist. So my father ended up having several Christmas cards made over the years that had beautiful drawings that the other girl had made. And here's the smorgasbord. In the middle of the table is my sister Carrie, and behind her is me, and the people are coming around, helping themselves as they go. You could come through more than once, but everybody took quite a little while the first time through. And then they all started on the far end, and when they got down here, they saw all the desserts. Ooh! The little puddings on the right were rum pudding. They had real rum in them. Ephriam was dry. But I don't think Mother and Dad cared. They didn't think anybody would get drunk on one pudding. I guess these words are too small for you to read them, but it's a schedule of everything that was served at the smorgasbord. So we had appetizers, salads, the hot dishes, the cold dishes, the various breads, and of course limpa was always there. And I think, Swedish limpa, Parker House rolls, homemade by Mother, Norwegian ideal bread, which was kind of like eating hardboard, and Swedish rye king. Pretty wonderful eating. The rosettes were for dessert. Also something called fattigmansbakel, which was a pastry that you cut out in a diamond shape and then made a hole in it and put one end through the hole and kind of pulled it like a knot and then deep fried it. Really good for you. Here's a little bit more colorful picture. You can see how bright our costumes were, and that all the food is there. The appetizers were handmade by all of us just before dinner. Oh boy, I didn't like that. And my special job was making the tossed salad. And it turns out that I had a skin allergy to the tartness of the tomatoes, so after every smorgasbord, my hands were bright red. And by next week, it had gone away, and then it would start all over again because I would have to make a salad again. My mother never thought of having somebody else make the salad. We had a very skilled artist working for us one year, and she kind of got into the idea of what the Scandinavian design would be. So she drew this, and Dad loved it. So this was the front of the menu, and we use it for numbers of other things. We didn't have a menu in the olden days. Grandpa Pete never had a menu. He fixed one thing for dinner, and you ate it and liked it. There weren't any choices. But then later, they decided that 3 meals a day wasn't the best idea, that the people who were so sophisticated from Chicago and Milwaukee might like to have the afternoon free and not have to show up again for lunch. So they decided to drop lunch. And there would be a little card on each place at the table, and you would say whether or not you wanted to come for lunch. And sometimes there would be quiet little cheers when they were all marked no. But then Mother thought, well, nobody in our place is coming, we might as well open to the public. So that's when they decided to invent a few dishes. So she became rather famous for something she called the Orca Burger. I bet a lot of you here have eaten an Orca Burger. It's very lean ground beef with a fair amount of horseradish mixed in and unsweetened whipped cream. You whip it first and then fold it together. Then you put it on a toasted bun, broil it, and oh my goodness, it's kind of like ambrosia. It's just wonderful. Probably no calories either. This is what the dining room used to look like. We are facing to the north, so that would be the north side, and there were 8 people to a table. You didn't come to dinner because you wanted to meet new people, but too bad for you, you did. We had to put people together. My dad spent a lot of time every day figuring out which group of people would fit with the other. Later on, my husband and his parents came to spend a few days at the Knudson house, and we were full. And Mother's dear friend, Judy Volkman, Dick Volkman's mother, had a lovely cottage, which they now live in. And Judy said, well, I wouldn't care if you would want to rent one of my rooms, but I'm not feeding them. So Dad said, great, they can eat here, and that's when they started having 2 servings. Dinner used to be only 6 o'clock, but then we started having 7:15 also for the extra people who might come from Aunt Judy's house. George and his parents stayed at Aunt Judy's house, and then he was bored one rainy night and came over to the Christensen house, and the rest is history. This is my mother and father at about the time of our 50th anniversary of the Knudson house. They made a big deal out of it, and it was pretty much fun. I don't think I have a picture of, there's Grandpa and Grandma, that's Grandpa Pete and Grandma Dina. Look how thin she was. Unfortunately, she was my step-grandma, so I didn't get those genes. This is dear Mrs. Harden. At the 50th dinner, Mother had asked numbers of people to speak, and the Hardens had been here about as long as the Knudson house had been there, so she knew a lot of things, so they asked her to speak. She had the dearest little voice. It was kind of quiet and high like this. And she would tell all this stuff, and everybody's craning their ears, hoping to be able to hear what she said. That's her son looking bored. The girl on the left was our pastry cook. Mother never hired real cooks. She tried it once. She had a French cook who was very opinionated and didn't want to make any of the things the way Mother wanted her to make it, so that was the end. So from then on, she hired most of her cooks from Stout State Institute, which is now a university, because they all had learned how to cook. And Mother would tell them when they arrived each spring, I know you know a lot of things about cooking. I hope you'll be able to forget all of them and do it my way. And they did. So the food remained constant because they all did it. And we had one young lady who wasn't Norwegian and wasn't from Stout. She could make the best homemade soup that any of us have ever tasted. Her name was Mary Votsberger, and she was a classical pianist, training to be one. I suppose she might have been 20 at the time. She was our cook for 4 years in a row. She played this piano for the community sing for the whole summer, many years in a row. She was amazing. And they would say to her, well, could you play us a little tune while they were having their break for the community sing? And she said, well, what would you like to hear? Oh, whatever you've memorized. So she would rip into the Warsaw Concerto. It was just fabulous. And she had, before she took the job, the first year, she said, I am a piano student, a piano major. I do have to practice every day. And Mother said, you can if you do it in the middle of the afternoon, not during a meal, but yes. So there were a lot of guests who showed up and just hung around to hear her practice because she was so excellent. Well, I was going to tell you about the other girl. On the left is the real pastry cook who was going to Stout State. On the right is a lady girl who was a waitress. And she came and said, oh, I like to bake too. And the mother thought, well, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but if you want to make a pie, go ahead. So they both made a cherry pie. They look exactly alike and they were fabulous. So Mother knew she had a backup if she needed it, but we never needed it. This is the water, the way it looked in the late 40s. When I was born, there was a rickety old dock there. I suppose Grandpa had built it. And it had a cement top that was cracking here and there. And it wasn't terribly safe, and it wasn't much fun to lie down on, because you know, waitresses are usually 18 years old and they certainly want a suntan, so they were always wanting to lie out. And then my dad thought, oh, this isn't working, we've got to get rid of that old dock. So they ripped it out, and you can't see where it joins the shore, but there was a tiny little bit of permanent dock at the shore. And then this, what would you call it, removable dock that went in and out. It was a procedure. Every spring, my father would get a couple of other men to help him, and they would put on waders and wade in, and pretty soon they were out deeper, and the water was coming in over the waders. It was not any fun. And then in the fall, they had to go through it all again in order to take it down. So after a while, Dad got tired of that and put up a permanent dock. That wasn't permanent either. There are no permanent docks in Ephriam because the weather has say. If the Norse gods say, we're going to have a bad storm and you're going to lose your dock, you will. There's no choice. But you have to rebuild year after year, and I guess all of you who live here in Ephriam or anywhere in Door County are just used to that. So you don't worry about it anymore. It's just part of what you have to do. This is a telegram, which you can't see very well, but I thought it was interesting. I guess I just wanted to brag a little bit. My dad was friends with several people who worked for the Chicago Sun-Times, and they would come up every year for a vacation, and then they would go home and put this terrific write-up about the Knudson house in the papers. I never asked any of the other hotel owners what they thought of that, but oh my goodness, Daddy sure loved it. So this is his congratulatory message from the Chicago Sun-Times and the Western Union Telegram also, which was, Western Union was a big deal when I was little. I guess it's not even there anymore. We all have our own cell phones, so we don't worry about that sort of thing. But if anybody got a telephone call, long distance, you dropped everything and rushed around. Well, we had a neighbor immediately to the north, Mr. Trezise, and he didn't have a phone because he didn't live there year-round. Why would he pay for a phone? So he asked us if it would be all right if he had a business call coming in. Would we mind if they called us, and then we could hang up and come down and get him, and he would come over. And one day I happened to answer the phone and found out that it was a call from Mr. Trezise, and I said, well, he'll call you back as soon as I can reach him. Well, that didn't make sense to this person from the city. And they said, well, can't you just go get him right now? And I said, well, yes, but it'll take me 10 or 15 minutes, and he might not be able to return with me. Do you want to hang on the phone that long? And he said, yes. So I thought, okay, it's your money. So I went over and got Mr. Trezise, and he said, I'll be there as soon as I can. And I said, I hope as soon as you can is sooner, because this man is hanging on the phone waiting for you, and he wouldn't hang up. And he said, oh, for goodness sakes. That's the silliest thing I ever heard of. And I thought, good, I'm vindicated. So Mr. Trezise was a real sweetie. I liked him so much. So that is the end of my presentation, and I hope you have a question or two because I'm quite sure I forgot a lot of things. Yes, Don?
You didn't talk about your pancake contest that you had.
I didn't.
No.
I'm so sorry, and there was even a picture of it in there. Oh my goodness. I don't know how it first began, but Mother and Dad made beautiful, absolutely delicious buttermilk pancakes, but they were the size of a coffee saucer, not this big, like now you get these enormous ones. So somebody was busy eating a whole lot of them after they'd had breakfast. Fruit, cereal, egg and toast, and now we'll have a few pancakes. And they ate a few more, and a few more. And Mother thought, I wonder if this should be a contest. So they had a sign painted, and the man's name was on it, and how many pancakes he had eaten, and what was the date. And other people would come into the dining room and see that sign and say, maybe we'll come for breakfast. Pretty soon, I think the final number on the sign, bear in mind you had to have fruit, cereal, egg and toast first. The final number of pancakes, I think, was 57. Guess what Mother gave as the prize? A box of bicarbonate of soda. They were good pancakes, but I could not eat that many. Yes?
It appeared as though, at least in one of the dinners, men were dressed for dinner. Was that usually what happened?
Yes.
Coats and ties.
Believe it or not, in those olden days, people didn't think anything of bringing coats and ties along with them on vacation. That's just how you dressed. So that's how they dressed. Ours was a very small dining room. It only seated 40 to begin with, and later 60. There were other dining rooms in the town, Eagle Inn for one, that had bigger dining rooms. And there were other people who served pancakes, which were the size of your dinner plate. Mother and Dad's were always saucer size. But yes, they did dress up. And I remember it took me a long time to be able to go to a concert dressed like this. I thought that was just unheard of. That's not how you dress. You get ready for something, which means putting on Sunday clothes, and you put on high-heeled shoes, and you get all gussied up, and then you go. Times have changed, haven't they?
In what year did Knudson House stop operating as the individual cottages that were rented out and the dining room?
Well, my family and I can't agree on this. I think it was 67. Some of us say 68. Some say 69. Do you know?
I'll help you out on that.
Good.
I was the first one to buy unit number 4, and that was in the spring of '73. And I bought it with the idea that it was a condominium, and at that point in my life, I had no idea what a condominium was. I couldn't even spell it. But it seemed like a unique opportunity to be able to buy a log cabin on the water with a very limited amount of money at that time. So, and to this day, it's an extremely prized possession. I love it, and it means a lot to me. It's added a whole new dimension to my lifestyle. All the friends that I've met. It's been fun.
The one thing I am so happy about recently, having learned that all the Knudson House owners, there are 12 owners. Well, it's 11 now, because my daughter and son-in-law bought one that had been joined, so number 11 and 12 became all of theirs, which is so convenient because all my Norwegian relatives have been here, and they're all staying with her. They're here tonight. But I think that they actually sold to Mr. Jacobs, Jim and Marty Jacobs, in 67-ish. And they ran it, I think, only 2 years as the hotel. And then he got the idea that they couldn't do this. His wife, I heard, had lost 20 pounds the first year. She did the cooking. Yes, she had a big family. That's different than cooking for 60 people 3 meals a day. So she lost all this weight, and that wasn't fun. So they decided that they would sell them individually. And I think there are still some Jacob kids living, I mean, they're old now, up here at this time.
Old like me.
Old like you. Yeah, my daughter. And Dick Volkman and his wife Susan still live in the cottage that my father used to rent rooms in for his mother Julia. And Julia would also fill in as a waitress. She often worked a smorgasbord. I didn't bring a costume for you, but we all had to wear these wild costumes that were hotter than Hades. And we looked just darling and we were sweating a lot.
Just a couple of comments. The red stockings were hot. My mom used to complain about
Yeah.
that. But that is about the time there was a pop song before that called Red Silk Stockings and Green Perfume. And every time she put on the stockings to go work at the smorgasbord, I would always sing the song to her.
I bet she hated it.
And your grandfather, I remember him so well, the kitchen. Even as he turned the business over to your mom, Dad, he would come in there and do prep work. And the kitchen ran east and west, and the west window in sink looked out over the bay. It was a gorgeous view.
So if you were the dishwasher, you didn't mind too
And he
badly?
would be there with maybe 5 or 6 whitefish about like this. That's what whitefish would do. And he would scale them and clean them, and it was always a lot of work, but he would always hum. Always had a little tune that he hummed. He was a happy person.
He was. He was.
And the last comment is the property that the Knudson house is on was my great-grandmother's. And
Katrina.
I was told that part of the deal was, in exchange for the property and money, that we would still be able to drive our cows over Highway 42 and down to the bay for a drink.
Well, I grew up with you. I didn't have a brother. I just had you, which was very fortunate. Thank you very much. And your mother, I couldn't have loved a real aunt anymore. So if any of you knew Julia Volkman, you were lucky. Question? Yeah.
I am enjoying all this because I too remember the 40s and the 50s and the 60s at Knudson House. And I did not go to smorgasbord every Thursday because my parents would take us or not. But every Friday I came to the back door of the Knudson House and ate leftover rosettes.
Joni always knew where all the cookies were kept. Really fun memories.
One last memory. Like most of the hotels, they created the food as much as they could. It was pre-processed, pre-packaged. And one of the things that they made at the Knudson House very well was ice cream.
That's right. Did you turn the crank a few times?
I can't tell you how many gallons I cranked, but you crank the ice cream underneath that summer kitchen.
Right.
And your dad had made a post that he would put underneath one of the floor joists and at the top of this ice cream maker, because it was not fastened. And as that ice cream got stiff, you couldn't turn the handle because you were moving the container. So he put that pole on there. We would crank it till we can't move it anymore. He'd open up the top, he'd pull the dasher out and scrape some of the clocks of ice cream back in the container. I'd put the dasher in a little handled aluminum pot, run up the steps into the back of the kitchen, and I would yell, "Spoons!" And everyone would come running and grab spoons out of a single container and eat the ice cream.
thank you all for your attention and for giving a hoot about my former life. It was a really good one, so thank you.